Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gaston Trauffler from FEDIL, and it will be my pleasure to host the upcoming panel called Industry Strategy Driven by Data. I think our panel couldn't be more current. We heard just the address of the Minister of the Economy speaking about or previewing us about the national industry strategy. Before we deep dive into our 45-minute session, I invite you to watch together as an introduction a video about construction companies' digitalization initiative.
Wir bei der Sugarlux probieren den Bau nicht mehr als Siloen zu sehen, sondern als ein Fluss an enger Richtung vom Anfang von der Plan bis hin zu den fertigen Produkt. Als Stehmetzer machen uns da Sachen, die als ein Gipser helfen, und als Gipser machen Sachen, die als ein Ausstreicher helfen. Taus von Haut ist zu kompliziert, wie den dat einfach Corps de Métier par Corps de Métier betrachtet. Wir brauchen extrem viel Daten für den Prozess all der Erkennen zu optimisieren. Und dafür haben wir die Roboter auf das Chantier geschickt, für zu scannen. Da gehen wir an den Finger drauf klicken. Und dann hier am Büro machen wir den Wein draus. Wir gehen auf das Chantier, scannen klicken, und als Pläne, die wir im Büro haben, die gehen dann automatisch verglichen mit den Scanner vom Chantier, und dadurch finden wir daraus, wo Unterschiede sind. Auf den nächsten paar Häusern hat sich der Roboter schon bald bezahlt gemacht, allein nicht durch die Fehler, die wir erkennen, wenn ein Tier gereckelt wird. Dann ist das mit dem Klient aufgeschwärzt im Chantier, aber der Techniker hat einfach vergessen, für das heran an das Büro zu melden. Und dadurch schaffen alle Guten die Leute, die nach ihm kommen, eigentlich auf falsche Pläne. Der Roboter detektiert die Fehler, aber wenn er dann weiß, wo die Tier genau steht, in Realität, den Moment können wir dann noch als Plan adaptieren. Das Wichtigste als Detektion vom Fehler. Kann auch sein, dass es falsch gebaut ist. Da können wir es reparieren, ehe viel andere Corps de Métier lernt kommen, aber den Fehler am Bau erst rektifiziert, weil es Männer kostet. Alle die Daten, die gescannt gehen alle bei uns auf einer sekurisierten Cloud gehalten, und wir können auch dem Klient die zur Verfügung stellen. Damit kann ihn eigentlich nachvollziehen während seinem Bau immer, wer das zu welchem Datum wo installiert gehen. Ob Haut machen wir noch nicht genug scannen, wir müssten eigentlich noch viel mehr machen. Andererseits sind Roboter Haut noch ein bisschen teuer, für den sie zu 10, 15 kann quer durch ein Haus laufen lassen.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, on stage. I would like now to welcome our guests, our three guests of today, and we will begin with Lucilla Sioli. She is joining us remotely from Brussels. Lucilla is Director of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Industry at the European Commission's DG Connect. We have Sasha Baillie here in the studio. She is the CEO of Luxinnovation, Luxembourg's innovation agency. And we have George Rassel. He is the CEO of Wurth, a global leader in iron-making technologies with a history of over 150 years of innovation. This should, ladies and gentlemen, be an interactive panel as much as possible. So please write your comments and questions into the chat box just below your screen. So let's begin. George, my first question is for you. Your company, which has deep roots in the manufacturing industry of steel making, recently invested in a company called Data Things, a Luxembourg startup company that is active in machine learning and live data analytics. How massively does digitalization impact the manufacturing industry to lead your company to an investment that seems so far out of your core business? And how do you envision the future of manufacturing industry in Europe, and what do you think are the biggest challenges ahead of us?
First, good morning, Gaston. And you immediately came up with, I would say, 3 questions. So I think Wurth, as you mentioned it, 150 years old, a very traditional company, has always been in the past 150 years seen that technology changes are happening and you have to adapt yourself. So Wurth and also our majority shareholders, the SMS Group, which also has 150 years old, both we have recognized that digitalization is really a key, I would say, also to survive in the business. We have to be aware that digitalization of the steel industries, but obviously also of all the manufacturing industries, is getting really of highest importance. And the importance is given, it starts with the design, and we have seen the construction where new methods today are used, but we see it also in the operation, where predictive quality can be assured by digitalization. Maintenance, where predictive maintenance and therefore asset health can be assured by digitalization. The safety of people working there is improved by digital solutions. And above all, also the whole cost efficiency is increased by digital solutions. So we have recognized this already early enough, about 5-6 years ago, where we started to think about, where we came up also developing partnerships with young startups, and one of these startups was DataThings, and where together we developed a solution for machine learning, and where DataThings has developed now in an extent that the next step is possible, and where it was like a natural development that as Wurth, as let's say host of this startup in our own incubator, which definitely helps to create this cooperation between traditional companies and new creative companies, we have decided to help them, to support them in order to further grow and to make also the solutions which are now developed and which we are continuing to develop together also available for other industries. So digitalization is key, and the future of the steel industry, for example, where I am coming from, is definitely enormously impacted by digitalization, and we can a little bit compare it with the car industry, where today we are speaking about self-driving autonomous cars, and we will also start to speak about self-driving, self-learning autonomous steel plants and other manufacturing plants. This is today maybe not yet reality, but it starts to become more and more reality, and one of the biggest challenges to handle this exchange of data, because the industry in general is quite a conservative let's say industry or activity where people try to protect their know-how as far as possible, but the development can only happen if a data exchange is possible. Anonymous data exchange is possible, and where we see it in the car industry, where big car producers are collecting today millions of data from their customers. So in the B2C business, this is obvious already since many years. In the B2B business, it's not yet obvious, and it's not yet also regulated how this data exchange can happen in a formal way. And this is one of the big challenges which we have to cope for, because only when this is really happening, it will be possible to have this artificial intelligence, for example, growing because data from many, many plants will be available and will be combined and will enable the further development of the solutions.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So self-running steel plants is a new concept to me, but quite a broad vision. Sasha, as the CEO of Luxinnovation, Luxembourg's innovation agency, you certainly have a very good overview about how digitalization unfolds within the Luxembourg economy, especially among SMEs. Can you maybe give us a description or appreciation about how our local industry's performance is in adopting digital technologies for innovation? And do those same challenges that George just described, for example, exchange of data and data protection, also play a role for SMEs in Luxembourg?
Yes, Gaston, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me. And yes, I mean, as a national innovation agency, we're there to support the companies in their innovation endeavors. And this is all about digitalization, access to data, connectivity of the data, and bringing our economy thus forward. So what we see, and I would put this in a wider European context and look at, for instance, there was a recent European Investment Bank survey on the adoption of digital technologies in the Luxembourg economy, in the Luxembourg industry by the Luxembourg companies. And what we see is we have a typical bell curve, really. So at the far end, on the right side, you see large companies like Wurth, who are very advanced, because actually what you see is that Luxembourg is among the front runners when it comes to adoption of these digital technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, big data. But it really is the big companies that are there at the forefront. And then you have in the middle of this bell curve, most of the SMEs that are really on this digital transformation path, but only in a gradual manner. And that's where we really help them to accelerate. And there is a real need there to move forward and to use the data that they have, render it accessible, as George just mentioned. I think what is really what we're seeing a lot also through COVID period is this digitalization has been accelerated. Lots more companies are using digital tools inside their company for their production, so especially in finance, in HR, workplace tools and so on, communication. But there's really a challenge and an opportunity when it comes to the outside of the company, looking at the customer experience, that data, those digital tools, and also the supply side of things, and integrating all this data, getting access to it and making it usable. That is where we really see the opportunities, and also the challenges really for the companies to understand how to seize this data, how to render it accessible, usable, and also to think beyond out of the box and what I can do with this data. How can I reach my customers differently, more efficiently, but also how can I actually, with all this data, find new customers, develop new business models, and that's where we really see the opportunity and accompany companies along that path.
Interesting, thank you very much. So companies still focusing a little bit too much on themselves and not enough using their data for customer acquisition and new businesses. I would like to zoom out now from the national level to the European level and address my next question to Lucilla. How are those challenges that we just heard from both of our representatives here in the studio mirrored on the EU level? And what initiatives does the Commission suggest to accelerate digital transformation? And maybe you could explain this a little bit from the view of the SMEs. For SMEs, often the EU Commission seems very far away. How can they take advantage more accessibly from your initiatives? Your microphone is okay now.
I will start again. So good morning, everyone. I think I can really agree with what has been said by the two speakers before me in terms of trends and in terms of acceleration of digitization that has taken place during COVID. I think we have observed two maybe contrasting trends. On the one hand, some companies have really taken the advantage of digitization during the COVID period and have understood that digitization was going to be important for their future. Others, however, have instead, they needed to cut investment, and some of this investment has been cut in digitization. So these two trends may risk to maybe accentuate the difference between companies of different size, companies in different regions. Indeed, especially when it comes to small, medium enterprises, not only we have differences between large enterprises and small enterprises, which has always been the case, because large enterprises have understood the benefits of digitalization earlier, probably because they had more experts in the company. But sometimes there are big differences between small, medium enterprises as well. So we have some enterprises are more advanced than others in terms of digitalization. And now during the period of recovery, digitalization is extremely important. As you can imagine, it will be one of the main ways to recover for many companies for all the reasons that have already been said before. SMEs are far from Brussels. Well, they are physically, and they are because they're small, but they are central to all our policies. I mean, even when any policy we make, any piece of legislation we make, we will always assess the impact that this legislation can have on small, medium enterprises. So they are at the center really of our policies. And in digitalization, we are setting up a European network of digital innovation hubs. These are technology organizations that can help small, medium enterprises to digitize, to understand what to do with the data they have, with the data of the customers, with the data they collect through the Internet of Things, and try this way to use artificial intelligence, become more productive, become more efficient, and also create maybe new markets and access new markets. And of course, we have had a whole series of policies on the digital single market exactly to allow also then these companies to grow, because that is the main problem for European companies, is their ability to grow and to grow across the single market.
So the digital innovation hubs are your main tools for SMEs, is that correct?
They are the digitalization of SMEs. Of course, this network will be working with other networks we have in Europe, like the network for the small businesses, technology infrastructures. We are setting up testing experimentation facilities in AI. So we have an AI on-demand platform, which has a lot of tools for using artificial intelligence. And the digital innovation hubs will have to work with all these other actors in a very integrated way so as to deliver services to companies. And we are making sure with member states that these hubs are in all the regions of the European Union. And I also hope to see some of the recovery fund being spent on the digital innovation hubs, because the European Commission supports 50% of their costs through the Digital Euro program. The other 50% is supported by member states. And so it's good that now we also have the recovery fund to help this kind of support.
Great, thank you very much. I'm sure Sasha will tell us about the Digital Innovation Hub initiative in Luxembourg. Allow me to stay a little bit longer with you, Lucilla. I would like to mention this quote that's often said that data is often referred to the oil of the future. It illustrates the enormous value that can be generated from data, and also its power to renew whole industries. We just heard George about his renewal initiatives, and also new emerging industries that will come up, next generation industries. So it's a huge asset, just as for oil. So if we stay with that comparison, I wonder, are we going to fight wars for data? And how is the European Commission making this an orderly process that exploitation of data does not lead to conflicts?
Well, I really hope that data does not lead to conflict. But I agree with you that it's the new oil, although maybe differently from oil, most of the value of data is generated when the data is actually shared. And I think that the data, in particular those generated by the machines, can be fuel for the recovery of Europe. It's true that many of the consumers' data maybe are also in the hands of companies and large companies in other parts of the world, but the European Union has the specific advantage of having access to a very large amount of machine-generated data that now we are not using very much. And when we speak to industry, we hear that the main challenge is technical, in terms of interoperability and infrastructures hosting the data, and also legal challenges linked to who owns the data and what can be done with the data. So the policy of the European Union is around two main pillars. On the one hand, we want to build capacity in data infrastructure, and on the other hand, we want to clarify the rules that apply to the data. So when we want to increase our capacity in data, we do two things. First, we build data spaces, and with the Digital Euro program, we have put available a certain amount of money, again, to be co-funded with member states, for setting up data spaces. For the period of 21-22, we hope to be able to set up to 9 or 10 data spaces that range from manufacturing to procurement, from agriculture to healthcare. And so basically in the main areas that of our economies. And on the other hand, we also try to set up an infrastructure that is able to host these data spaces and also process the data. And I'm thinking of the federated cloud infrastructure that was also mentioned earlier with these kind of capabilities. But then we also, as I said, need to advance from the legal point of view, and we need to make sure that if businesses want to sell or to buy data, they have to, first of all, trust the provider of a data sharing service and also know what they can do or what they cannot do with the data. We, in parallel, are also making sure that public sector data are shared more widely, and they can also be very useful for companies. Not long ago, we adopted a Data Governance Act, which exactly facilitates the sharing of data in certain sectors, in particular creating the figure of an intermediary that is independent, that is trustful, and that can manage this data. But before the end of the year, we will be proposing a Data Act, which will be particularly targeting the exchange of data in a business-to-business context, and then the exchange of data between business and government. And we hope, of course, in all these activities that member states join in and help us defining the rules and help us strengthening the capacity for the data. Because we don't need the data per se, we need the data to use artificial intelligence and to create more opportunities economically and also from the point of view of society and of the environment. Thanks.
Thank you. So lots of initiatives planned here for all the huge volumes of data that we expect to emerge in the coming years. Let's come back to our studio here with George. The quantity of data that you are collecting from your installations around the world must be huge. What does this data allow you to do today, what you could not do before, and is there already a business plan or monetization, valorization behind it? You spoke about predictive maintenance, safety of work, of course cost efficiencies. So this is all well in place, and maybe if you refer to what Lucilla just said, can you use those new data spaces, infrastructures and process capabilities that she spoke of?
Yes. But yes, the data we are collecting, or which we have the possibility to collect today, is already enormous. And speaking about one single blast furnace, we can collect today up to 20,000 information per second, which leads to 1 terabyte for 5 years. And this is just a blast furnace. So when you imagine a complete steel plant transforming the iron which we are producing into finished products, there are hundreds of thousands of data or of information collected each second. So these are enormous quantities which today we are able to collect, which obviously, I think one of the most important things is to extract what is valuable out of this data. This is one of the main key things to be solved, how to extract really the meaningful information from all this data and how to make use of this information. I would say storing today of enormous quantities is no more really a problem. But really transforming data into information, but also information into data. This is really the key of many things, and therefore we need also solutions to do this in an let's say, in an adequate way. The collection of data today is something where I would say we are putting now less efforts in. What we are really seeing as a challenge, how to, as I said already, meaningful information, but it's not just data science. I think a company like ours and like our, let's say, the customers, the operators of manufacturing plants, they have really long years, decades of experience. All this experience of how a process works, how a machine works, what is the consequence of an information which is out of range, how to handle this situation. This is really where the value can be added and where we can create also, and what we are doing already, creating new business models, really using the possibility to collect the data, but to also to understand the data and to transform it in an action for the future. And so we can create, and we are offering today already to our customers, business models where we offer like performance as a service. Performance as a service, and where we are changing from an, let's say, a supplier of an initial equipment to really a partner, a lifetime partner for the process, for the operation, for the maintenance. And this is what is currently under development, which we have started with some of our customers. And this is really a win-win situation for everybody at the end of the day. So it's not just the data itself.
I see. Extremely interesting. So you're becoming more like a solution provider that guarantees productivity rather than just supplying parts and solutions for single plant
Absolutely.
departments.
And there is also what makes a difference between a data company, I would call it, and a company like ours, which is a technology company. Yes. Where we can really do the interpretation and do the recommendation of the necessary actions in order to improve quality, reliability, safety, operational costs, and you name it.
So, Sasha, George, he just mentioned that one of his major challenges is to make the interpretation of the data and to find out what is valuable and what isn't. So if we stay with our comparison between data and oil, it would be the same as I finding an oil well at home and I don't have the means to exploit it. So I don't have the refineries, I don't have a chemical plant that can transform it into jet engine or gasoline and sell it. So how is Luxinnovation as the National Innovation Agency supporting local businesses to find their refineries, so to transform their data into value, find out what makes sense, what doesn't make?
Well, I think as George pointed out, data is an extremely complex matter. It's all these tiny particles of all this massive information inside the company, but also outside the company. And for every company the type of information it has, the data it has is different, but it's not always accessible. It's not always usable. So first, the company needs to understand how to structure its data, how to be able to render it accessible, and then also to explore according to its own markets, its products and its services, what it can do differently with this massive information of a valuable resource that it can then reach different types of clients with, develop its business around, offer something more and more efficiently than it has before. So what we do as an innovation agency, we do not and we cannot tell the business how to develop a new business case, but we can challenge the business on its business strategies and how it is approaching it, to see maybe out of the box other opportunities. We also connect the businesses with others who have maybe gone down that path. There are experiences to share. There are solution providers out there that can help them, but it's such a big challenge to find the right fit. And that's where, as an innovation agency, we have a very good overview of the ecosystem and can connect the dots. And that's also where Lucilla mentioned it, the European Digital Innovation Hubs. And our Digital Innovation Hub in Luxembourg is at Luxinnovation. And its job is precisely to do what Lucilla was pointing out, is connecting the needs of the industry with those that can provide the solutions, be it in the area of research, with our research institutions in University in Luxembourg, but also startups, as George mentioned, like DataThings, right? What can DataThings do for other industries in Luxembourg? And that's where we really endeavor to connect those dots and help the companies to move forward, to see that there's an opportunity with that valuable resource they have, to see how they internally can reorganize it, to get access to it, and then do other things with it.
We just have a question from the audience that asks, well, this is fine that we try to extract value from the data, but what about data protection?
This is to me. Yes, I mean, that is something that is extremely important. And I think George mentioned it also, that companies are very careful of their data. Obviously, it is their value, it's their ownership, and it's extremely important that to guarantee that that is 100% secure and can be trusted. And only then will actually all this kind of data will be able to be interconnected. And it's not only a technical matter, it's really a trust and secure matter. So, and George mentioned it too, what we really need is some form of a data exchange platform that can render this data accessible and usable, yes, technically interoperable, but also so that it's absolutely guaranteed that it is secure, that data protection is guaranteed, that personal privacy is guaranteed. And that is something that is within our reach, and the European Commission is working on that, the Member States are working on that, we are working on that in Luxembourg. But it's a big challenge, but it's doable.
Do you maybe have an example of a company that you accompanied in putting in place such a digital strategy?
Yes, I mean, there are lots of companies we accompany. Wurth is one, of course, but there are others. I'm thinking now there's a company called SEBI. They are one of the European, it's a Europe and even world leaders in washers, pumpers, temperature sensors, and they are carrying out a research and innovation project using digital technologies. So here it's about really rendering their production lines more efficient, connecting them to the IT systems, but also using artificial intelligence. So automatizing the data collection and then bringing in artificial intelligence to make the production equipment more efficient. And this is where they are actually also using the startup that George mentioned before, that came out of the incubator, DataThings. And they are helping them set up this using the artificial intelligence in their production lines. They are also working with the SNT from the Luxembourg University. So it's a classic case of this knowledge, this expertise from the outside, from the research coming into the company and helping them render their processes, their production lines more efficient. And it's a research and innovation project. Where does Luxinnovation come in? Again, it's connecting these actors, helping them structure the research project in a manner that they can also get public funding. And that's extremely important because it has to be eligible for public funding. And there also we help to structure it in that manner. So that's what our innovation agency also does.
All right, thank you so much. Let's stay with you, Sasha, for a moment. We often hear that Luxembourg has the ambition to become a data-driven economy, and Minister Fayot, he spoke in that sense just half an hour ago. Can you describe a little bit this vision? Maybe it is a bit, it is not so tangible for everyone. What are concrete undertakings and where our industry can take part in it? What is their role and where can they get a piece of the pie?
Yes. Also, a lot of questions you threw out there, Gaston, many different dimensions. Yes, I do believe that we can become a leading data economy as Luxembourg, a data-driven economy. And what does that really mean? It does mean, I believe strongly, that Luxembourg could render data accessible, and if we can do that from very multiple sources, we're talking about companies' data, research data, public data, render it accessible and usable, yet guarantee data protection and personal privacy in that way that businesses can actually develop and test solutions around this data. I absolutely am convinced that this can open a new, can become a new backbone even of our economy. We've done it in the past. We did it with the financial center. We saw where the global trends were, what's happening in the world. And we also were able to, in an agile, efficient, and really safe manner, develop our economy around that. And I'm convinced that data is something that we can also use in that manner in order to develop a new backbone of our economy, safe and secure, and that is really absolutely key. You asked the question of how do we actually get this done? And there I come back to the point of it's about a data exchange platform. And that is absolutely key. And I think at a country level, Luxembourg is capable to do that, and also to really position ourselves within Europe, because we cannot do this alone. This is part of a European strategy anyhow. If we were to set up such a data exchange platform, I also think it could be part of the EU recovery plan. It fits into there. And that way we could really make Luxembourg the place where data solutions can be developed with companies, by companies, with research, with government, and really move our country forward and Europe that way. So, yeah.
Great, thank you so much. This has become a little bit more tangible now, but it seems like there's a lot of work still to do until we get there. I would like to go back to Lucilla. You are directing on a European basis artificial intelligence initiatives. Artificial intelligence, we heard it many times already today, is bound to become a revolutionary technology in many sectors. This technology is set to enable human capability to software such as understanding, reasoning, planning, communication, and perception. Use cases seem to be endless. Nevertheless, today, Europe is not considered a global leader in artificial intelligence. In a 2019 report by the Center for Data Innovation, EU countries attracted about 4 times less venture capital and equity funding for AI companies compared to the US, and half of that of China. Are we going to miss the boat here? What are the initiatives of the EU to catch up?
I don't think Europe will miss the boat. There are initiatives in terms of venture capital, taking into account, however, that in general Europe invests less in venture capital than the United States, for example. But we have had and we are having initiatives for artificial intelligence. Last year, for example, with the European Investment Fund, we launched a pilot to support startups and SMEs, both in the early stages and in the scale-up phase, for equity finance, for artificial intelligence and blockchain. We invested 100 million euros from Horizon Europe from Horizon 2020, sorry, but it is estimated that the volume of funding is now reaching 700 million euros. And in December, because also this initiative was so successful, the European Investment Bank launched a new co-investment facility of 150 million euros to support the growth of artificial intelligence companies. On top of this, within Horizon Europe, we have the European Innovation Council, which supports startups in innovation, development and scaling up, and also specifically in artificial intelligence. So we do have programs that help to use venture capital for artificial intelligence. Now, I don't think this is the only way to be innovative in the European Union or elsewhere in the world. I think that the European Union can become a leader in artificial intelligence, first of all, if it is able to develop it and exploit it in its industrial sectors, because that's where our comparative advantage really is. And secondly, we have to put in place policies which are looking at research efforts, and that we do. We have Horizon Europe, we have important investment in research excellence networks in artificial intelligence, but we also need to be faster at bringing innovation closer to the market. So one new element we are introducing in our policies through the Digital Europe program with the help of the member states is the setup of testing and experimentation facilities. We are going to do that in manufacturing, in healthcare, in agri-food, for smart communities, also for the hardware of AI, which is basically chips for AI. And the idea is to allow innovators to come and test and validate in almost real environments their innovations. This is very important in artificial intelligence because of all the risks and the concerns that go with it. And so I hope that these new facilities will also allow Europeans to become much more innovative in the future.
Thank you very much. We have a question here, very interesting, from our audience about the concern of data security, asking if we should not invest in data sovereignty and open source software to reduce the use of EU-owned cloud platforms which pose a great risk or privacy risk. Lucilla, do EU clouds represent the privacy risk?
Well, I think that the privacy risks are basically addressed by the legislation that we have in Europe. Of course, we need to have some, it's easier when you have reciprocity, when you have equivalence in other countries in terms of the treatment of data. I think that talking about a European cloud is probably against our trade policies as well. I mean, the European market is a market which is always open to investment also from foreign companies, as long as they respect our rules, and that includes our privacy rules. They're welcome to invest in the European Union. What we need in Europe is a much more federated effort that is going to increase the trust from the point of view of privacy, from the point of view of security, also cybersecurity, also for artificial intelligence purposes. So there is a scope of making sure that in Europe the rules are respected and that clouds providers really federate around a clear set of rules that increase the trust of the users. Like it was said also by the previous speakers, trust in data and trust also then in technologies like artificial intelligence is very, very important for their uptake. Thank you so much. Maybe Sasha, you can reply from a national perspective.
Yes, I think the answer to that question is basically yes, we should invest in that, and I think that's what Europe is also doing, also with as Lucilla just said, with European Federated Cloud. That's also what the Gaia X initiative is about, and Luxembourg is involved on that, so we're going to take part and position ourselves strongly. And our minister also mentioned this morning in his speech that there is the willingness there to invest in that with an IPCEI. So there is definitely movement in that direction. So the answer is clearly yes.
We have another question from the audience to George, asking how now Paul Wurth has this Incube initiative with their own startups. Do you also plan to further collaborate more with IT, outside IT companies? There are apparently concerns about reinventing the wheel in your own incubator. Is that a danger?
I would say this is not a danger, and already today as well, let's say, the members of our incubator, the startups, as also Paul Wurth itself, we are really in exchange with other players on a not only European but worldwide, let's say, basis. Networks are already existing, in future even growing for sure. Just as an example, we have cooperation on the group level with a large data company, artificial intelligence in the US. We have also on a group basis acquired a stake in a special, let's say, energy solution-based company in Brazil. So where we are creating now, even internally in our group, these networks and avoiding to reinvent the wheel, as it was asked.
I'm very glad we have a lot of questions from the audience. Another one we have for Lucilla, a person asking whether the EU is planning an initiative to develop a sandbox for personal data services. Is that something in plan or already happened? Maybe you can also explain a little bit more what a sandbox is, that might not be clear for everyone. Your microphone.
With the term sandbox, you can refer to different things. The most common way of using it is to a situation where in a closed controlled environment, certain legislation is lifted, and then you try to see how an innovation works in an environment where a certain legislation does not apply. Then there are other ways of simply calling regulatory sandboxes environments where the regulator is working with the innovator in trying to understand how that innovation can be put on a market respecting existing rules. So what the European Union is doing is that we are thinking of introducing or facilitating the introduction of regulatory sandboxes, in particular for artificial intelligence. But of course, when we talk about sandboxes for artificial intelligence, very often the reference is also to the ability of the innovator to use the data, in particular the personal data, respecting existing rules. It is also about the fact that artificial intelligence, for example, does not discriminate for fundamental rights or does not introduce new safety risks. These are all reasons which can justify the use of a regulatory sandbox. And we will come forward with a proposal in April. So, but this is to confirm that we are thinking of facilitating the setup of such sandboxes. For example, in relation also to the testing experimentation facilities I was mentioning earlier, they can be a very good facility exactly for testing innovation and seeing what happens and discussing with the regulator to see whether that particular innovation is compliant and how it can be compliant with existing legislation.
Thank you very much. I have to monitor a little bit the time here, so I'm moving on to my last question on the Industry Day, of course, for the industry representative. George, industry is challenged today not only by the digital transformation, but also by a climate challenge, by the energy transition. Are those two transitions linked? Can they take advantage one of each other?
I would say they are extremely linked, and we will not come to let's say, a climate protection solution without digitalization. Let's say we have to come away from fossil sources, energy sources, to a hydrogen-based economy, which will at least help to solve a lot of issues and problems. But the way towards is not easy. And transforming the current installations into less greenhouse gas producing factories, or even on a complete hydrogen-based, let's say, energy sources, is really extremely difficult, will be also not immediately, and therefore we need digital solutions in order to support this, to change the, let's say, the experiences also which have been accumulated for many, many decades in a rather quickly operating, let's say, new way, which is also already optimized, because the optimization which we are facing today is a result of decades of experiences. Now we have to be very quick. And which comes into addition is that in the past, most of our, let's say, for example, steel plant were just relying on the coal they were introducing as energy source. If no coal is used anymore, but for example, green hydrogen, we have to know green hydrogen means it's using renewable electricity to produce the hydrogen. The solar, the wind is not always turning or producing electricity in the same way. So there are external factors which are added to the internal requirements. And so without digitalization, this will be, I would say today, not possible in a reasonable time, at least not.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close our panel with this last answer by George. And thank you so much to all the panelists. Thank you also, Lucilla, in Brussels. As a closing, we suggest to watch another video of a Luxembourg company's digitalization initiative. And after that video, my colleague Angela will be back with a presentation of the PwC AI Lab. Thank you very much.
Du point de vue digitalisation, Bimedical, ça fait déjà plusieurs années que nous y travaillons comme priorité essentielle pour le développement de notre entreprise, parce que nous avons reconnu très rapidement l'importance de cette technologie pour la vaccination. Les vaccins sont distribués dans le monde entier et très souvent dans des endroits très difficiles d'accès. Et grâce à l'intelligence embarquée, on peut même à des milliers de kilomètres du Luxembourg être garanti que les vaccins arrivent à bon port au sein de la population qui en a cruellement besoin.
Ja, Frigoen, die wir heute zu Hause bauen, die sind eigentlich gemacht für an Entwicklungsländer Impfstoffe zu lagern. Und die Impfstoffe, die müssen immer zwischen 2 und 8 Grad gelagert sein. Also mit kalt gehen oder mit warm gehen, da gibt es Futti. Und dann gehen die Kinder, die geimpft gehen, haben eigentlich keinen Impfstoff gekriegt und können krank gehen. Wir schaffen auch darum, für uns Frigoen immer mehr intelligent zu machen. Das heißt, dass wir an der Lage sind, eigentlich zu wissen, von Lützenburg aus, ob alle einzelnen Frigoen in den Ländern funktionieren. Und dafür benutzen wir sogenannte Remote Temperature Monitoring Devices, die erlauben uns zu sehen, wo der Frigo ist, also mit der Geolokalisation über Google Maps. Wir sehen Temperatur am Frigo, wir sehen Temperatur außerhalb vom Frigo am Centre de Santé, wir sehen, ob ein Deckel oben dazu ist, und wir sehen noch das Niveau von der Batterie am Datalogger. Und das hilft uns eben zu gucken, wie die Geräte funktionieren, und wann mal ein Futti ist, dann noch einen Techniker dahin zu schicken, den das pflegt für uns.
Aujourd'hui, les données sont essentielles pour connaître la bonne gestion de la chaîne du froid dans un pays. Et ce n'est pas uniquement intéressant pour nous, comme fabricants de matériel de qualité, pour s'en assurer à distance et en tout point de la distribution, mais également pour les ministères de la Santé. Et les ministères de la Santé doivent connaître l'efficacité de leur programme de vaccination. Et le point faible, le chaînon faible des programmes de vaccination, c'est la chaîne du froid. Donc, grâce à l'intelligence embarquée pour les ministères de la Santé, vous avez l'assurance de l'efficacité de votre immunisation dans le pays.
Thank you very much, Gaston, and thank you to the panelists who gave a lot of input for a new industrial strategy driven by data.